what we're looking at here is a group of linked scenes, which comes really at the end of the first half of the film, when Rose has married George and has come to live at the Burbank Ranch. George, to celebrate his marriage, has decided to invite the governor to dinner, and his wife and his parents, which is an amazing stress for Rose. Class stress combined with performance stress, because George loves the idea that Rose is going to play piano for them. Phil, where Phil has proven his superiority in every which way as a musician, and so it's in that environment that Rose is anticipating her performance this evening.
We've been building up to this scene for quite some time. George has asked Rose to play the piano, a lot of psychological torment between there and this scene, kind of building the awkwardness and the tension between all these people.
In a way to bond and to build the tension, we had quite a long piece of Johnny's music called The Prelude, which has a kind of percussive drive to it, like it's really building or creating or moving to something. And I think that's something we kept trying to do shot-wise with Ari and myself, like place Rose alone, and isolate her in the midst of the dinner party.
When I first read this scene, it was definitely scary to think about how to light this big space and have it still feel dark. Until this point in the film, we're very much daylight and candles kind of world. And the book talks about the Burbank Ranch, the first house in the valley to have electricity. And so, I built a light that was a very big soft source to make all the reflections feel very big, painterly but luxury soft top light that would cover everyone. And then moving over to the piano to go more into the firelight, and the little, you can see the firelight on Rose kind of ups the drama a bit with this kind of very slight flicker that you see present. I remember some of the really early conversations that we had, myself, Grant, and Jane, was about the windows in this in the house. And I'm really glad we went with the backdrops idea. I think that was yours, Grant, rather than blue screen or green screen, to actually print photos that we took on location and have them out the windows.
Yeah, they're never easy. They look simple enough. And I think the main thing is getting the horizon line at the right height to what the camera is, and that was sort of a key thing for us. But we took the shots, and there are things that we had to paint out of the shots before we had them printed. Our unit base, for example, and things like that. So it's kind of an old kind of craft in a way, these physical backdrops, because modern films do bump to green screen a lot these days. But I thought it gave us some real benefits in the way that it was lit, Ari, that because the scene goes from late afternoon through into evening, and you could see the light drop and that wonderful sort of atmospheric kind of feel to it.
This scene was super challenging, and I really love how it's come together. You really feel for her in this from the very outset.
What I wanted to do is feel completely present in where I was. So I really did get lost in the scene. I also remember not talking to anybody that day much, because I wanted the first thing to come out of my mouth to sound like, like someone who hadn't spoken all day.
Knowing deep down that it's very unlikely that Phil is going to wash up and play a part, but there's just this such a hope that he can finally sort of step into this new role. He now has a wife, and there's such a pride there that I just feel like everything gets crossed and he kind of just completely freezes, and that was excruciating as well.
And I remember everything that we had for nothing in the barn, that amazing location, even the weather at times was just blessing us with a habitat and a connection to the story and to this character I was trying to honor and become. I felt very nervous about clinking across that car park in furry chaps and spurs and feeling like I was at some kind of weird cosplay party. And so I was really, really trying to hold on to what it was that I'd come from in that barn.
We talked about in the script, you never saw that first moment where Rose drinks, and we put it in this scene.
Yes, I think that was very, very smart of you. I kept saying that maybe Rose should be sipping all through this scene because it's so tense for her, and you were really, really adamant that no, let's make absolutely clear that Rose is not a drinker, and let's just really highlight that moment when she just succumbs to that first drink.
I'm so sorry. I can't seem to play.
This moment is like crucial and totally, totally important. That to see someone innocent and hopeful like Rose be humiliated is, just so painful.
You didn't play? Sure did practice a terrible lot. See, you wouldn't think there's much difference between a cinema pit and a dinner party.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being anxious about the sort of the very open volley of you wouldn't think there's much difference between playing in a cinema pit and a dinner party, and that being the most sort of opaque kind of dig at Rose, whereas the rest of it is, like Jane says, it is a secret between us, the abuser and the abused, and that's the tragic thing about it.
There aren't many moments where George is really present and witnessing exactly what Phil is doing to Rose. And this was one where I remember talking to Jane. I was just like, I just don't understand how it's not getting some sort of a rise out of George. That was really tough. The difficult part was to shut down some of these natural impulses that I have, that, seeing her little face, it's just like, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's true.
I really had to keep saying to you, please stop cuddling her and supporting her. And at the very end, we were looking for something to highlight this moment of Rose's isolation. And I think we actually asked Johnny to design something for this, which he quite ironically or sarcastically called Lovely Evening, which is...
I suppose it's a pretentious way of trying to have music which is out of character and isn't what you necessarily expect, trying to get a limited palette together. And the limitation was I had like one microphone and these two string instruments. For Rose and her sort of social awkwardness, let's push it into being inhuman in how it sounds. And the fact that it kind of became a theme for Rose and her drunkenness and her confusion, and that's when it really connected, I think, as an idea.
This is a scene where it's shortly after the first time Pete has come into a somewhat uncomfortable contact with Phil, where he saw Phil in his sacred space and had been chased out of it. But it's I feel like the first time from the audience perspective, just in the walk alone, that our judgments of him being somewhat naive transmute into a assertive nature. Everyone was hooting and hollering and teasing him the first time round, and then on his way back they're all silent, which I think is something very powerful and makes them look very silly. And it's probably something that he experiences a lot. Everyone ultimately has this judgment about him at first, but then they're silenced by him. So this is the beginning of, at least for Pete, selfishly speaking, from my point of view, where he begins to pull back the layers of Phil.
It's sort of also because of the way that you put it together, that long tracking shot where it's so unchildlike, this walk, and there's such like power. And like you said, Kodi, I didn't fully register as it did watching this time, the silence on that walk back, but to be wide, and then he drops in, and then to see this person that's not Kodi, maybe there are aspects of it, but this innocence that you're like, oh, this is a child. But then as the scene progresses, that's also, they're both playing a game and a part here. There's just so much happening with both of you guys. But yeah,
You know what?
What? Phil?
Now, you see, you did it. You called me Phil. I'm gonna finish this rope and give it to you and teach you how to use it. Sort of a lonesome place out here, Pete, unless you get in the swing of things.
Thank you. Phil?
Phil playing a role we haven't really seen before, this sort of fake chummy thing he's doing, where we don't really know what he's trying to achieve here. Like, and I'm not even sure if Phil knows what he's trying to achieve. I look forward to hearing what Ben has to say about it. But what I think is really happening is that he's just using his instincts. He wants to bring the boy closer. He's going to turn it around, and also for the to actually really stick the knife once again in Rose, because now that Pete's arrived, it's a real comfort to Rose to have him there. And Phil, I think, gets the intuition that if he can change that and bring Pete close to him and drag him away from Rose, that this will be absolutely destabilizing for her. It will be like the final straw. But we don't really trust Phil. We don't really know what his goals are, and we're not really going to know, and this is where the mystery begins, where the film really starts diving into unknown territory, and we can't be sure what the ambitions are for either Pete or Phil.
From my perspective, there were two things that were very immediately kind of going on for Phil. The first was that he saw an unexpected strength in the boy's blithe ignoring of his mocking, and I think the idea that he could see someone, he's very alert to the wolf whistles and the name calling, and it's definitely something I'm looking, and so there's some kind of electricity to that moment, but then it's all about the way that Peter responds that really floors Phil.
It was a really hard scene to actually edit too, wasn't it, Pete?
Absolutely. Yeah, really hard. I think we spent more time on this scene than any other scene in the movie. Also, we had so much coverage of these extras who had been growing their beards for like 6 months to fit the part. We didn't use any. It's also a scene with the most people in it in the film, like extras wise, and then just the dynamics and the geography of the conversation that Phil and Peter have is really tricky, because Rose over here, and also how much could we go to Rose without kind of before the dialogue would kind of, but the between Pete and Phil would just start to, you kind of really need to focus on them while knowing Rose is watching. So it was just a really tricky balance to get that.
I guess it's hard for a young'un like you to call an old fella like me just plain Phil at first. Now come and take a look at this.
And I'm really in love with the fake chumminess that Phil produces here, and that little trick, which is sort of so ironic, really, where he gets Pete to lean in and call him actually Phil rather than Mr. Burbank, that Phil thinks he's in charge here, or in charge generally, and what a reversal there is going to be.
The film has very restricted color palette, kind of by design, that we wanted to keep everything in the world of the ranch with these very dusty, dry, kind of silvery gold browns of the leather and the horses and the cattle, and this scene kind of presented a bit of both a challenge and an opportunity to kind of, would we break that rule and have this abundance of green, and ultimately decided that yes, we should embrace it and have this be a kind of exception, this and Phil's willowy glade. It was quite a challenge in the color grading. It's probably one of the scenes we spent the most time on in the grade.
Yeah, the tones of the trees are different as well. So look at the grass here and the trees, and it's just like vivid green. It could be like a light green sometimes. So it goes through a lot of different greens, you could say, through summertime. We did have to be very careful with our grass lawn through there, because grass keeps growing, and once we claimed that space as being where we wanted to film, we did need to trim it down, but let it come away again just enough to make it feel natural and sort of uncut in a way. So it always takes a little bit of manipulation with our greens team to be able to make it feel natural but controllable.
It's a very precise art as well, the braiding, that each strip has to be the same tension and the same width. I love hearing you say about the tension, the weaving of all the equal parts, very equal, each one with its precision.
We ended up finding a quantity of the tents and making quite a few of them as well, after scrutinizing a lot of research images of what these campsites used to be like and what the kitchen would have been like, and where they cooked up all the food. And
but I really love George in the scene too, how you're just going about doing the work, like bringing the food down to the kitchen, the camp kitchen, and totally preoccupied with getting
our background acting.
A lot of walnuts that day.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.